The morning was colder than she expected, and the sky was a color of steel when she wrapped her old coat tighter around her shoulders and held her little boy's hand. He was only 6, his cheeks red from the wind, his shoes too thin for the pavement. They walked together through a busy street toward the tall glass building where her interview would be held. Her heart pounded with every step. She whispered softly to him, "Stay close to me, sweetheart, we are almost there." He nodded bravely, though she could feel his tiny fingers trembling in hers. The building rose like a giant above them, reflecting the gray sky and its mirrored walls. People in sharp suits hurried in and out, moving with the confidence of those who belonged. She paused for a moment outside the revolving doors, adjusting her hair and smoothing the wrinkles in her skirt. She looked down at her son, who gazed up at the towering structure with wide eyes. She bent down and kissed his forehead, whispering, "We will be okay. Just smile and stay quiet." He nodded again, clutching his small backpack. Inside, the lobby was warm and bright, marble floors shining under chandeliers, reception desks lined with polished, with the air smell faintly of perfume and coffee. Her son clung to her side. As she approached the desk, the receptionist looked up with a professional smile that faltered when she noticed the boy. "Good morning," the receptionist said in a clipped tone. "Do you have an appointment?" "Yes," the woman replied nervously. "I am here for the assistant manager interview." The receptionist's eyes flicked to the child and then back to her. She handed her a badge without comment, but the look in her eyes said everything. They sat together in the waiting area, leather chairs gleaming under soft lights. The boy swung his legs nervously and whispered, "Mama, everyone is looking at me." She squeezed his hand. "No one important, just keep your head up. Remember, we are here for a reason." He nodded bravely again, but she could feel his unease. She tried to focus on her breathing, reminding herself that she had prepared for this interview, rehearsed answers, studied the company history. This was her chance, her one chance to step out of the cycle of rejection and minimum wage shifts. Minutes passed slowly, each second stretching like an eternity. Finally, a woman in a gray suit appeared from the hallway. She carried a clipboard, and her lips pressed into a thin line. She scanned the waiting area until her eyes locked onto mother and child. Her brows furrowed slightly, and she said sharply, "You are here for the interview?" "Yes," the woman said, standing quickly and pulling her son gently to his feet. The woman in gray looked at the boy with clear disapproval. "I am sorry, but children are not allowed in the interview room." The words cut like ice. The mother's cheeks flushed. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, fumbling for words. She whispered softly, "I had no choice. There was no one to watch him. I could not leave him alone." The woman in gray shook her head, unsympathetic. "That may be, but this is a professional environment. Bringing a child shows a lack of seriousness." Other candidates sitting nearby looked up, some with pity, others with thinly veiled amusement. The boy's face turned red, and he clutched his mother's hand tighter. "Mama," he whispered, "are we leaving?" She bent down quickly, holding him close, whispering, "No, baby, not yet." She turned back to the woman in gray, her voice trembling. "Please, just give me a chance. I have prepared for this. I know I can do the job." The woman in gray pursed her lips, shaking her head. "The rules are clear. If you cannot arrange basic childcare, how can we expect you to handle the responsibilities of this position?" Her son buried his face in her coat, tears stinging his eyes. She held him tightly, feeling humiliation burn inside her, but she forced herself to stand straight. She said quietly, "I came here today because I need to build a future for him. I am not asking for favors, only for a chance to prove myself." For a moment, the woman in gray hesitated, but then her expression hardened. "I am sorry, the decision is final. You will need to reapply at another time when you are properly prepared." The mother felt her chest tighten, as if all the air had been drained from the room. She nodded numbly and turned toward the door, her son clutching her hand with small, desperate fingers. As they walked across the lobby, her mind swirled with panic and despair. She had borrowed money for transportation, pressed her only clean clothes ironed late into the night. She had hoped this would be the turning point. Now all she felt was a sting of rejection. Once again she whispered to herself over and over, "I cannot break in front of him. I cannot break." Her son tugged her sleeve. "Mama, are we going home?" She knelt beside him in the middle of the lobby, pulling him close and forcing a smile. "Yes, sweetheart, we are going home." Her eyes stung, but she held back the tears. "Not here, not now." But as she rose to leave, the sound of footsteps echoed sharply against a marble floor, slow, deliberate, commanding the noise silence. The lobby conversations hushed. Heads turned toward the source of the sound. A man in a dark tailored suit walked through the entrance, his presence filling the space. Instantly, his eyes sharp, his movements precise. Everyone recognized him. Adrian Cole, the CEO, millionaire, founder of the company. Himself, the woman froze her son's hand tight in hers. He spoke clearly for everyone to hear. "Since when does determination and responsibility count as unprofessional the room shifted restless the woman in gray stammered. But sir, the rules, Adrian raised a hand, rules exist to guide us, not to punish those who are fighting harder than most. He looked back at the mother and said, quietly, you came here for an interview. You will have it today with me personally. Gasps rippled through the lobby. The receptionist dropped her pen. Other candidates exchanged shocked looks. The woman in gray's mouth open and closed, but no words. Came the mother, stood stunned, her son clutching her side. Adrian gestured toward the elevator. Please follow me. She hesitated, trembling, torn between fear and hope. Her son looked up at her, his eyes shining. Mama, does this mean you can still try? She knelt, kissed his forehead, and whispered, yes, baby, it means we still have a chance together. They followed Adrian to the elevator. The doors closed behind them, cutting off the whispers of the lobby. The elevator ride felt endless. The mother held her son close while Adrian stood tall beside them, silent but steady. The boy stared at the glowing numbers climbing higher and higher until finally the doors opened into a floor unlike anything she had ever seen. The office stretched wide with glass walls overlooking the city, the skyline painted in silver light from the winter sun. Adrian led them to a large conference room polished with tables, soft leather chairs. He gestured for her to sit. She lowered herself. Slowly her son perched beside her still. Clutching her hand, Adrian sat across his eyes, never leaving hers. He spoke evenly. Tell me your name. She swallowed nervously. My name is Sarah Miller, sir. He nodded. And this is your son, Ethan. She nodded again, brushing hair from the boy's forehead. Adrian leaned back, studying them both. Then he said, you came today ready to prove yourself, and they try to deny you because your mother. Is that correct? She whispered, yes, her voice shaking Adrian's gaze. Hardened, that is not how this company will treat people, not while I lead it. He paused and leaned forward. Tell me about yourself, about why you want this position. Sarah took a shaky breath. She explained how she had worked long shifts at diners, how she had studied at night after putting Ethan to sleep, how she believed she could organize schedules, manage tasks, keep things running efficiently. Her words spilled out mixed with nerves and raw determination. Adrian listened intently, never interrupting. When she finished, silence filled the room. Adrian looked at Ethan, who fidgeted with the strap of his backpack. Adrian asked, do you know what your mother has done for you? Ethan, the boy, looked up shyly. She reads to me every night. Even when she is tired, she makes me pancakes on Sundays. Even when we do not have much. Adrian nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. That is strength. He turned back to Sarah and said firmly, you are not disqualified for being a mother. You are stronger because of it. I want people like you here, people who fight for their family. She blinked, tears threatening her eyes. Sir, are you saying? Adrian stood and extended his hand. I am saying welcome to the company. Sarah froze, then slowly reached out, taking his hand. Her grip was trembling but strong. Ethan looked between him, his face lighting up. Mama, does this mean you got the job? She pulled him into her arms, whispering, yes, baby, yes, I did. Adrian watched the embrace, something unreadable in his eyes. Then he added softly, from this day on, no one in this building will question your worth again. The moment hung heavy with emotion. Sarah felt the weight of years of rejection lifting, replaced by a fragile thread of hope. She whispered, thank you. Adrian's voice softened. Do not thank me, prove me right. Sarah walked out of the tall glass building that evening with Ethan's small hand in hers. The city lights flickered like stars against the steel sky, and the cold no longer bitter the way it had that morning. Her chest felt lighter, almost strange with relief. She glanced down at Ethan, who skipped at her side, humming softly. She whispered, we did it, baby, we really did it. Ethan smiled up at her, his eyes wide with wonder. Mama, you are going to work with a man in the suit? Sarah laughed quietly, the sound surprising even her. Yes, sweetheart, I am. They returned to their small apartment 2 flights up in a worn building with peeling paint and narrow hallways. The stairs creaked under their steps. Inside, the rooms were small but tidy. Sarah's careful hands had made it a home. She set Ethan's backpack on the table and began preparing dinner, a simple meal of pasta and sauce. Ethan sat on the couch, his drawing spread across the cushions. He drew the tall building, the shiny floor, the man in the dark suit. He handed the picture to her shyly. Mama, this is us today. Sarah's throat tightened. She kissed the top of his head and whispered, we will never forget this day. The next morning, Sarah dressed in her best clothes. Again, her nerves hummed, but determination steadied her. She walked Ethan to the neighbor's apartment. Mrs. Lopez, a kind woman, who agreed to watch him until school started. Ethan clung to Sarah's coat. Mama, do not be late. She kissed his cheek. I will be back before dinner, I promise. At the building, security guided her upstairs directly to the HR floor. The woman in gray from before looked up sharply when Sarah entered, but this time her voice was clipped with forced politeness. Good morning, Miss Miller. You will begin orientation today. Sarah met her gaze firmly. Good morning. The woman's lips tightened, But she said nothing Sarah spent the day filling forms listening to. Presentations, learning procedures. She worked hard to absorb every detail. When the session ended late in the afternoon, she was told that Adrian wanted to see her personally. Her pulse quickened as she followed the assistant to his office. The CEO's office was vast walls of glass framing the city below. Adrian stood by the window, hands behind his back. When she entered, he turned his gaze. Steady welcome. Sarah, how was your first day? She clasped her hands nervously. It was good, sir, I am. Grateful for the chance, Adrian nodded. You earned it, not me giving it. You will be working directly with my executive team, assisting in project management. It will not be easy, but I believe you can handle it. Sarah swallowed hard. Yes, sir. I will not let you down. He studied her for a moment, then asked softly, how is your son? Sarah blinked, surprised. He is fine, sir. Excited. Adrian's expression softened. Tell him, I look forward to seeing more of his drawings. They stood in silence for a beat, then he dismissed her with a nod. Good work today, Miss Miller. She left the officer. Heart-racing days turned into weeks. Sarah arrived early, every morning balancing schedules, preparing reports, coordinating meetings. She worked with quiet efficiency, earning respect from some and resentment from others. Whispers followed her in the halls. Some said she had been given favoritism. Others said she was unprofessional for being a single mother. She ignored them, focusing only on her work and on Ethan at home. Every night she returned to him tired, but smiling, reading his stories, listening to his dreams. But not everyone was content. The woman in gray, Margaret, began making Sarah's tasks more difficult, piling extra files on her desk, correcting her with sharp remarks in front of others. Sarah endured it silently, refusing to break. But one afternoon, after a particularly long meeting, Margaret snapped in front of the team, some of us work twice as hard and do not bring our personal lives into the office. Sarah's cheeks burned, but she lifted her head calmly. I do not bring my personal life into this office. I bring my dedication. If that is not enough, then nothing but room. Fell silent. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Adrian entered at that exact moment, his gaze sweeping the tense faces. What is going on here? Margaret stammered. Nothing, sir. Just a discussion. Adrian's eyes narrowed, then turned to Sarah. Miss Miller, may I see you in my office? Sarah followed him, her heart pounding. In the privacy of the office, Adrian spoke quietly. You do not need to defend yourself to anyone. Your work speaks clearly. She hesitated, then whispered, thank you, but I do not want special protection. Adrian nodded firmly. And you are not getting it. You are earning your place every day. He paused and added, and I am watching. Sarah left the office steadier than before. She knew the path ahead would not be easy, but she also knew she was no longer invisible. She had a place now, and a fight worth enduring. Sarah adjusted quickly to the rhythm of her new life. Every morning began before sunrise. She prepared Ethan's breakfast, packed a small bag, then hurried him across the hall to Mrs. Lopez before she caught the early bus into the city. Her body ached from exhaustion, but her spirit burned stronger with each passing day at the office. She tackled schedules, reports, and endless lists with determination. She stayed late when needed, sometimes catching the last bus home. Her paycheck, though modest compared to others, felt like gold in her hand. She paid rent on time, bought Ethan warmer shoes, and even saved a few bills in a jar marked future. Yet whispers still followed her. Some colleagues avoided her, others watched with thinly veiled disdain. Margaret, in particular, seemed determined to break her. She often interrupted Sarah during meetings, corrected her in front of clients, and once even claimed credit for an idea Sarah had contributed. Sarah gritted her teeth, but never faltered. She reminded herself, I am not here for their approval. I am here for my son. Adrian observed more than he spoke. He often passed through the office, his presence commanding, yet his eyes lingered sometimes on Sarah's desk, on the steady way she organized chaos. His assistants noticed, but said nothing. One evening, after a particularly intense meeting, Adrian asked Sarah to remain behind. The others filed out, leaving the vast room silent. Adrian leaned against the table, his gaze steady. You kept that meeting together, he said calmly. Without you, the deal would have collapsed. Sarah blinked, startled. Thank you, sir. I was only doing my job. Adrian shook his head firmly. No, you were doing more. You were leading without needing the title. Sarah felt warm flood her chest, but quickly lowered her eyes. I only want to prove myself. Adrian studied her for a moment, then his tone softened. You already are Miss Miller. That night on the bus ride home, Sarah stared out the window, the city lights blurring past. She thought of the years of rejection, the countless applications tossed aside, the humiliations. She thought of Ethan's small face pressed against her coat the day they tried to send her away, and she thought of the man who stepped forward, who had given her a chance when no one else would. She whispered to herself, I cannot fail at home. Ethan greeted her with laughter. Mama, look, I built a rocket from boxes. He pointed proudly at the cardboard creation taped together. Sarah knelt beside him, admiring every detail. She hugged him tightly, whispering, this is why I fight. He giggled. Mama, "You smell like bread." In paper, she laughed for the first time in days. Weeks passed, and Sarah's confidence grew. She handled more responsibilities, even covering for managers when they were away. Clients began to request her by name. Adrian noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The way some colleagues begrudgingly respected her work, Margaret, however, grew colder. One afternoon, Sarah overheard her speaking to another employee, saying she will not last. She is just a charity case, Adrian's pet project. Sarah bit her tongue. But the word stung deep. The next morning, Sarah arrived early, determined to let her work drown out the noise. She set up the conference room, prepared documents, checked every detail. When Adrian entered later, he paused at the sight. Everything was perfect. He glanced at her and gave a small nod of approval. For Sarah, that silent gesture outweighed 1,000 insults. But Margaret was not done. She filed a complaint claiming Sarah was overstepping boundaries by taking on tasks beyond her role. HR called Sarah in for questioning. Sarah explained calmly that she had only filled gaps when needed, but the sting of accusation lingered. She returned to her desk, her hands shaking, but her posture unbroken. She refused to let Margaret see her fall. That evening, as Sarah prepared to leave, Adrian called her into his office again. His voice was calm, but his eyes sharp. "I know about the complaint." He said, "You do not need to defend yourself. I see everything. I know who carries weight here." Sarah exhaled slowly. "Thank you, sir, but I cannot let anyone think I am receiving favors." Adrian leaned forward. "You are not. This company was built on strength, and you embody it. Do not let small minds convince you otherwise." When she left his office, Sarah's steps were lighter. She walked to the marble lobby, head high, Ethan's drawing of their family tucked safely in her bag. She whispered to herself, "They can doubt me, but I will not doubt myself." The winter stretched on long and cold, but Sarah's determination only burned brighter. She balanced her new role with motherhood, each day a careful dance between deadlines and bedtime stories. Ethan thrived in school, bringing home drawings of rockets and planets that he proudly taped to their small apartment walls. Sarah treasured each picture as proof that they were climbing slowly out of the shadows of the office. Sarah's reputation continued to grow. One afternoon, a senior client arrived unannounced. The team scrambled, but Sarah stepped forward with calm confidence. She offered coffee, presented organized documents, and answered questions with clarity. The client later told Adrian, "I trust her. She knows what she is doing." Adrian gave a small smile, but said nothing, his eyes only flicking briefly to Sarah with quiet approval. Yet Margaret's resentment sharpened. She began whispering to others, claiming Sarah was manipulating Adrian for favoritism. The rumors spread like cracks through glass. Sarah heard fragments in the break room and the hallways. Her chest ached, but she held her silence, refusing to let poison distract her. She returned home each night with a tired smile for Ethan, never letting him see the weight she carried. One evening, after a long day, Sarah sat at her desk long after others had left. She reviewed reports by the glow of her desk lamp. The office was quiet, except for the hum of the city outside. Suddenly, she sensed someone watching. She looked up to see Adrian leaning in the doorway, his coat draped over his arm. "You should go home," he said gently. Sarah rubbed her eyes. "I wanted to be sure everything was perfect for tomorrow." He stepped into the room, standing close enough for his presence to steady her. "You have already done more than enough." Sarah hesitated, then whispered, "Do you ever regret giving me this chance?" Adrian studied her for a long moment, then said firmly, never. Her throat tightened. She lowered her eyes. "Thank you, sir, for everything." He gave a faint smile. "Do not thank me. Just keep proving the world wrong." That night on the bus, Sarah replayed his words. She thought of the boardrooms, the whispers, the weight of Margaret's hatred, and the small apartment where Ethan slept. She whispered to herself, "I will prove them all wrong. I will." The next morning brought another test. Margaret arranged for Sarah to present at a major meeting with little notice, hoping she would stumble. But Sarah arrived prepared. She spoke clearly, her voice steady, her facts precise. Even those who doubted her nodded in approval. Adrian sat at the head of the table, watching with quiet pride. When she finished, the room was silent for a beat, then filled with murmurs of agreement. The project was approved unanimously. After the meeting, Adrian approached her in the hallway. He said softly, "You turn a trap into a triumph." She blinked, confused. "A trap?" He nodded. Margaret hoped he would fail, but instead you shine. Sarah's stomach twisted, but she forced a small smile. "I will keep shining." Then he returned the smile. "That is exactly what I expect." That evening, Sarah returned home to Ethan, who ran into her arms, shouting, "Mama, I got an A on my spelling test." She lifted him high, laughing. Through tears of joy and exhaustion, she whispered, "You are the reason. I will never stop fighting." He hugged her tightly. "Mama, we are going to be okay." She kissed his cheek. "Yes, sweetheart. The tension inside the office grew heavier. With each passing week, Sarah could feel it in the way conversations paused when she entered the break room, the way glances lingered on her a little too long. Margaret's whispers had taken root, spreading through the team like a silent poison. Some colleagues smiled to her face, but their eyes carried doubt. Others avoided her entirely. Sarah carried the weight, quietly focusing only on her work. And on Ethan at home one morning, she arrived earlier than usual, hoping to organize reports before the rush. She found Margaret already there standing by the printer. With a stack of papers, her eyes narrowed a moment. She saw Sarah. "You really think you belong here?" "Don't you?" Margaret sneered. Sarah inhaled slowly, refusing to show fear. "I am here to do my job." Nothing more. Margaret stepped closer, her voice sharp. "You are nothing but a charity project. The only reason you are here is because the boss pities you." Sarah's cheeks burned, but she stood her ground. "I earned my place, Margaret. I work hard every day. You cannot take that from me." Margaret smirked. "We will see about that day." Margaret set another trap. She reassigned Sarah's tasks last minute, deliberately giving her conflicting deadlines. Sarah's hands shook as she typed through the afternoon, her heart racing. She pushed herself harder, refusing to let Margaret win. Late in the evening, Adrian passed by. Noticing her still at her desk, he stepped in quietly. "Miss Miller, why are you still here?" She looked up startled, then hesitated. Margaret changed the deadline. "Sir, I am trying to finish." Adrian's eyes hardened. He said nothing, but the next morning an announcement was made. All task changes must be approved directly by management. The team exchanged uneasy glances. Sarah kept her focus steady, but inside relief washed through her. Still, Margaret was relentless. She found new ways to undermine Sarah's small remarks in meetings, subtle digs that wore on her spirit. One afternoon, during a major presentation, Margaret interrupted loudly, saying, "Are you sure those numbers are correct? Miss Miller, you always seem distracted by your personal life." The room went silent. Sarah's heart pounded. She glanced at Adrian, sitting at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. She steadied her voice. "The numbers are accurate, sir. Here is the supporting data." She handed out documents, her hand trembling. The client reviewed them, nodded, and said, "Everything checks out." Adrian's gaze swept the room, landing on Margaret for a long, cold second. Silence followed that night. Sarah returned home, exhausted. Ethan met her at the door with a crayon, drawing, "Mama, look, I drew us in a big office together." Sarah knelt, hugging him tightly, fighting tears. She whispered, "Thank you, sweetheart. You remind me why I cannot give up the storm Margaret had been building." Finally began to break. A week later, Sarah walked into the office and felt the weight of eyes on her more than ever. Something had changed. She sat at her desk and opened her email only to find a message forwarded to the entire team. It was a mistake that looked like her as a financial figure typed incorrectly in a client document. The email suggested negligence. Her chest tightened. She knew immediately she had not written those numbers. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, checking the original file on her drive. And her suspicion was confirmed. Someone had altered it. Margaret walked past her desk at that moment, a faint smile curling her lips. Sarah clenched her fist but forced herself to stay calm. The whispers began around her. "Already? Did you see the mistake? Did you see how sloppy she is?" Sarah swallowed hard. She could almost hear Margaret's voice in every corner of the office, whispering, "She is not fit for this job. She is just a project." At noon, Sarah was called into the conference room. The executive team sat around the table, their faces tense. Adrian sat at the head, his expression unreadable. Margaret was already there, papers neatly arranged in front of her. Sarah stood with her hands trembling. The manager, leading the discussion, said, "Miss Miller, we have received a troubling report regarding inaccuracies in a client file." Margaret slid the document forward, her voice smooth. "This level of error could cost us a major contract." Adrian's eyes turned to Sarah. "Tell us what happened." Her throat tightened, but she forced her voice steady. "I checked that file 3 times before sending it. Those numbers were correct when I left my desk." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting someone else tampered with it?" Sarah looked directly at her and said, "I am saying I know my work, and I know this was not my error." Silence hung in the air. Adrian's gaze flicked between them. Margaret tried to hold his eye, but his expression did not change. He finally said, "We will review the original files." Meeting adjourned. As the room emptied, Margaret brushed past Sarah, whispering, "You will not last here much longer." Sarah's pulse hammered, but she walked out with her head high. She returned to her desk, opened her notebook, and scribbled fiercely, "I will not break. I will not give it a victory later." That evening, Adrian appeared at her desk again. The office had emptied, leaving only the hum of the city beyond the glass. He spoke quietly. "The investigation already shows the file was altered after you submitted it." Sarah's eyes widened. Relief and anger surged together. "Who would do that?" Adrian's gaze was hard. "You already know." Sarah whispered. Margaret. Adrian did not answer. But his silence was confirmation. He finally said, "You do not need to fight this alone. I will not allow your name to be dragged through the dirt." She met his eyes and whispered, "Why are you doing this for me?" He answered simply, "Because you earned your place, and because integrity matters more than power." The next day, Adrian called a full team meeting. The tension was sharp. Everyone gathered at the long table. Margaret sat near the center, her face smooth and controlled. Adrian entered carrying a folder. He placed it on the table and said flatly, "Yesterday a document was circulated suggesting incompetence by Miss Miller. Our review shows that file was altered after it left her hands." He opened the folder, revealing printed timestamps and logs. The evidence was clear. Margaret's face flickered, but she masked it quickly. Adrian's voice sharpened. "This company will not tolerate sabotage. Anyone who thinks otherwise can leave now." Silence suffocated the room. Margaret shifted in her chair, her eyes cold. "Adrian," continued, "Miss Miller has performed with excellence under pressure and with loyalty beyond measure. She is an example of what this company values, and she will remain here." The meeting ended abruptly, whispers trailing in the wake of Adrian's words. Sarah sat frozen, her hands clenched in her lap. She had expected to be humiliated. Instead, she had been defended openly by the man who once turned the entire lobby silent. Ethan's face filled her mind, his smile, his little voice, saying, "Mama, we are going to be okay." She blinked back tears and whispered to herself, "Yes, baby, we are." That night, Sarah and Adrian left the building together. Their steps echoed against the marble floor of the lobby. Adrian walked with his hands in his pockets, his expression distant. She finally said, "Thank you." He glanced at her, his voice low. "Do not thank me. You are the one who stood tall. I only confirm the truth." She smiled faintly, but inside her chest ached with gratitude and something else she dared not name. When she returned home, Ethan was waiting by the window. He ran into her arms. "Mama, you are late. I was worried." She hugged him tight, whispering, "I am here, sweetheart. I am always here." He pulled back, looking into her eyes. "Mama, you are strong." Sarah kissed his forehead, her voice breaking. "Yes, but I am strong because of you." The days after the meeting felt different. The office buzzed with quieter whispers. Some curious, some cautious people looked at Sarah with new eyes. No longer just as the single mother who stumbled into an interview, but as a woman who had stood against humiliation and walked away stronger. Margaret's presence grew colder. She no longer spoke directly to Sarah, but the hostility in her eyes remained. Sarah ignored it, focusing on her reports or projects and her son. Every morning she kissed Ethan goodbye and told him, "Mama is building something for us." Every night she returned to him exhausted, but with a smile. One afternoon, Sarah found herself in the elevator with two colleagues who spoke softly, thinking she could not hear. One said she survived that storm. "I did not expect her to last." The other replied to so clearly trusts her maybe more than anyone. Sarah stood silently, her heart pounding. She did not want favoritism. She only wanted fairness. But hearing those words planted something inside her, recognition that perhaps Adrian's belief in her was real. The pressure at work did not vanish. The deadlines grew tighter, the expectations higher. But Sarah no longer felt invisible. She spoke with more confidence during meetings, shared her ideas with clarity, and even corrected mistakes others overlooked. Ethan noticed the change at home. He said, one evening, "Mama, you walk taller now." She laughed, hugging him tightly. "That is because you make me strong." Still shadows linger. Margaret continued to scheme, though less openly. Adrian kept a close watch, his presence a shield. Sarah sometimes caught his gaze across the table, steady and grounding. She wondered if he realized how much it meant to her, that someone finally saw her not as a burden, but as a force. One Friday evening, as the office emptied, Adrian called Sarah into his office. The city glowed to the glass walls. He gestured for her to sit. She lowered herself into the chair, nerves tightening in her chest. He spoke calmly. "You have done more than anyone expected. You have proven resilience and skill. I want to give you more responsibilities." Sarah's eyes widened. "More responsibilities, sir?" He nodded. "You will oversee a new project directly reporting to me. It will not be easy, but I believe you can lead it." She swallowed hard, thinking of Ethan, thinking of a journey from the bench outside to this moment. She whispered, "I will not fail." He leaned back, a faint smile on his lips. "I know you will not." When she left the office that night, the city air felt different, lighter. She walked to the bus stop, her notebook clutched against her chest. Inside she had written earlier, "I will prove them wrong." Now she crossed out the word wrong and wrote, "I will prove myself." She looked up at the night sky, whispering to herself, "This is only the beginning." At home, Ethan was still awake, waiting with a blanket around his shoulders. He ran into her arms, asking, "Mama, how was your day?" She lifted him, spinning once before whispering, "My day was hard, but it ended with hope." Ethan hugged her neck tightly. "Mama, I knew you could do it." She kissed his cheek. "Yes, baby, we can do anything together." The following weeks moved quickly. Sarah adjusted to her new role with the same determination that had carried her through rejection and humiliation. She coordinated projects, balanced schedules, and managed a small team who at first looked at her with skepticism but soon realized the precision and strength. Adrian gave her space to lead, but his presence was always there, steady and watchful. Margaret, however, refused to fade into silence. She lingered in corners, spreading rumors, her eyes cold whenever they landed on Sarah. One afternoon, Sarah overheard her whispering to another executive, "She is nothing more than a single mother clinging to sympathy. If the CEO were not watching, she would already be gone." Sarah clenched her jaw and walked away, refusing to give Margaret the victory of reaction. But Adrian heard the whispers too. He summoned Margaret to his office late one evening, his voice low and sharp. "I gave you opportunities, Margaret. I trusted your leadership, and you used it to tear down others, not build them." Margaret stiffened. "Sir, I only wanted what is best for company." Adrian cut her off. "No, what is best for the company is integrity and loyalty. You have shown neither from today forward. You will step back from your position." The silence in the office the next morning was deafening. Margaret packed her things, her face pale and tight. People whispered again, but this time they whispered about justice. Sarah heard the news while preparing reports. She felt no triumph, only relief. She whispered to herself, "It is over, or at least this part is over." That evening, she walked home lighter. Ethan ran to her with a drawing in his hand. "Mama, look, I made us a castle." She hugged him tight, whispering, "We are building it, baby, one brick at a time." Days turned into weeks, and Sarah's reputation grew. Even stronger clients praised her work. Colleagues began seeking her advice, and Ethan thrived at school. Adrian often stopped by her desk, not to question, but to listen, sometimes to ask her opinion directly in front of others. Sarah realized he was not just offending her, he was elevating her. One morning, Adrian called Sarah into the large conference room. The entire executive team was present. Sarah froze for a moment until Adrian gestured for her to stand beside him. He spoke clearly. "This company was built on resilience, on people who fight harder than circumstances allow. Today, I want to recognize someone who embodies that spirit, Miss Sarah Miller." He turned to her directly and said, "You are no longer simply an assistant, you are a project lead, and you have my full confidence." The room erupted in polite applause, some genuine, some reluctant. Sarah's chest swelled with disbelief. She whispered, "Thank you, sir." Adrian met her eyes steady and unwavering. "You earned this." Every step of the way that evening when she returned home, Ethan leapt into her arms. "Mama, why are you smiling so big?" She laughed, lifting him high. "Because today, baby, we proved that nothing can stop us." Ethan hugged her neck. "Mama, I always knew you were the strongest." She whispered through tears, "No, baby, you make me strong." Sarah's promotion changed the rhythm of her life, but not her spirit. She still rose before sunrise, still braided Ethan's hair for school, still carried her worn notebook, where she wrote every goal, every thought, every fear. Her office was now larger, with windows that looked out across the city lights. Yet she never forgot the cold bench, where everything had almost ended. She kept Ethan's drawing of their family taped to the corner of her desk, a reminder of why she fought. Some colleagues who once doubted her now respected her, approaching with genuine questions, seeking her guidance. Others remained cautious, unwilling to let go of their prejudices, but Sarah no longer carried the same weight of their judgment. She knew her worth. She had proven it in boardrooms, and on long nights when exhaustion nearly broke her, she walked with her head higher and her step steadier. Adrian noticed a change too in meetings. He asked for her insight, directly deferring to her perspective. When discussions grew tense, her words carried weight and her presence demanded attention. The shift was undeniable, and it unsettled some, but Adrian's confidence in her was unwavering. One evening, after a long strategy session, he lingered. As others left, he said, "Quietly, you have built something here that no one can take from you. Sarah, you should be proud." She looked in her eyes, bright with restrained emotion. "I am not proud for me. I am proud for Ethan, for giving him a mother who will never stop climbing." Adrian smiled faintly. "That is exactly why I believed in you." But the world outside the office walls was not blind. Whispers reached the media. Once again, rumors swirled. A single mother rising the company's ranks, with the CEO's favorite headlines painted half-truths. Some framed her as a symbol of resilience. Others accused her of manipulation. Sarah read the words late one night after Ethan had gone to bed. Her hands trembled over the glowing screen. She whispered to herself, "I cannot let them define me." The next day, Adrian found her pale and distracted at her desk. He asked softly, "What did you read?" She looked up, her eyes wet. "They are calling me things I am not. They are saying I do not belong." He leaned closer, his voice steady. "Do not give them your tears. They do not Deserve them, Sarah bit her lip. But what if it hurts Ethan? He deserves better than whispers. Adrian's eyes softened. He deserved the truth. And the truth is his mother is stronger than any lie. He paused and added, let me deal with the noise. You focus on what you do best. Still the fear lingered. Ethan asked one evening, Mama, why do people talk about us on the news? Sarah knelt, pulling him closer. Voice shook. But she answered, because sometimes people fear what they do not understand. But we know who we are, and that is enough. Ethan nodded solemnly. Mama, I am proud of you. She kissed his forehead through her tears. I am proud of us. The pressure built again. When investors questioned Adrian's decisions during a quarterly review, Hale returned sharp and cold, accusing Adrian of letting personal sentiment cloud his judgment. He gestured towards Sarah, indirectly saying, we cannot risk this company's reputation on emotional projects. Adrian's voice cut through the room, cold and precise. This company's reputation is built on results. Miss Miller has delivered them consistently. If you cannot see that, then perhaps you are the one blinded by sentiment. The board fell silent. Sarah's heart pounded, but she stood tall, her eyes locked on the table, refusing to let Hale see her fear. Later, Adrian walked with her through the quiet lobby. He said calmly, men like Hale will always try to reduce you, but they cannot erase what you have accomplished. Sarah looked at him for a long moment and whispered, do you ever regret standing up for me? Adrian's eyes held hers steady. Never, not for a second. That night, Sarah returned home and sat by the window. Ethan asleep in his bed, she opened her notebook and wrote, today, I realize strength is not about silent. Strength is about speaking when the world tries to quiet you. She closed the book and whispered to herself, we are still rising. The storm finally broke on a cold Friday morning. Sarah arrived at the office to find reporters waiting outside, their cameras flashing. Questions shouted into the freezing air. She held Ethan's drawing close inside her bag, as if it could shield her from the noise. Security guided her through the doors, but her chest was tight, her pulse racing inside. The lobby, whispers followed her steps. Once again, Adrian was already waiting upstairs. He called a press conference that afternoon, determined to silence the storm. Sarah begged, quietly, please do not drag me into the spotlight. He shook his head gently, not to expose you, but to honor you. The conference room filled with journalists, their pens ready, their cameras aimed. Adrian stood at the podium, tall and steady. Sarah waited near the back, her heart pounding. He began with calm precision, speaking of the company's growth, of its challenges, of its future. Then his voice shifted, firm and personal. He said, some have questioned the presence of a single mother in our ranks. Some have painted her as a weakness. Let me be clear, she is our strength. Gasps rippled across the room. Cameras clicked. Adrian continued, Miss Miller came here fighting for a chance. When others try to push her away, she has proven herself not with privilege, but with persistence, not with favors, but with results. This company is proud to have her and proud to stand for what she represents, a future where resilience is valued above pedigree. The room buzzed with questions, but Adrian's words carried like steel. Sarah stood frozen, tears slipping down her cheeks unnoticed. For the first time in years, she did not feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was seen. When the conference ended, Adrian approached her quietly away from the flashing cameras. He said softly, they will not touch you again. She whispered through trembling lips, why are you doing this for me? His gaze was steady. Because you remind me of what this company should stand for. Because you remind me of myself when I was fighting to be heard. That evening, Sarah returned home to Ethan, who ran into her arms. Mama, everyone was talking about you on TV. She laughed through her tears. What did they say, sweetheart? He grinned. They said you are a hero. She pulled him close, whispering, no, baby, I am just your mom. But in her heart, she felt the truth. She had become more than she ever believed possible. She tucked Ethan into bed, kissed his forehead, and sat by the window, notebook in hand. She wrote, today, I stood tall, not just for me, but for every mother who has been told she does not belong. I will never forget the bench in the park, but it no longer defines me. What defines me now is hope. She closed the notebook, wiped her tears, and whispered into the night, we made it, baby. We are home. The city lights glowed like stars outside her window. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah let herself breathe freely. The battle was not over, but the war had shifted. She was no longer alone. She had her son, her strength, and a future that felt wide open.